I think it's really interesting to learn about Malick's methods in shooting and editing, because this is the first he's done these sorts of like post facto things with voiceover in the previous films and like making the film through voiceover, but this seems to be the first one where it's like, yeah, like you said, is full on like extreme shooting tons of footage and then building the film out of that method. But it's also interesting how that reflected itself like on the shoot. So one of the things that I learned about this is that he would never, most directors would decide like, is this scene going to be sunny? Is it going to be cloudy? Is it going to be rainy? And then like wait for the sun to come out if it's cloudy that morning or whatever. But Malick would just shoot whenever. And like, so he wouldn't wait for the sun. He would just shoot the scene cloudy, and then maybe he'd shoot another take during the magic hour and another take sunny. And he told one of the actors that way he could put the scene wherever he wanted in the film.
Oh, wow.
Like in the timeline
That's
of the
awesome.
day's events.
Wow.
But also he could do part of a scene sunny and part of a scene cloudy, you know, just psychologically or whatever. So that's kind of fascinating. Another thing people said that he did a lot was he would shoot a scene, a talking version, and then he would shoot a no talking version of the scene, and then like decide what you wanted to use later on.
Wow.
So I mean, those are just like tidbits, but I wanted to maybe throw that to you, Nathan, to just talk about his methods a little bit more. And
it's actually quite it's really striking when you think about it, because the sort of the orthodox way of making a narrative film is like, you know, you really have to have a strong idea going in of how the scene is supposed to play. You know, if you're a director going in and you're like, yeah, let's shoot it with dialogue and let's do it without dialogue, you know, that would suggest that you don't actually know what it is that you want to achieve. With some directors, that might be the case, who might end up doing that. With Malick, though, it's obvious that like, okay, so what is he really after? You know, he's clearly after something more. And I love actually that strategy of doing it with dialogue and then doing it entirely without, because one of the things you run into when you're shooting a dialogue scene of any kind is inevitably when you get into the edit, you're always going to be kicking yourself at some point, because you could always use a few more seconds of somebody not saying something to cut with, or to pad out a moment, to extend the feeling of a moment. This happens so frequently in this kind of work where you're like, why didn't I just hold them that take longer? You know? And I love the idea that Malick, you know, protects himself in that sense by just shooting an entire take without dialogue. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's really somebody who's giving, I think it takes a lot of confidence to do that. And we've been talking about freedom, you know, like there's a freedom and acceptance that, the classic kind of proverb about filmmaking is, you know, there's the writing stage. A film is kind of in its own state at that point, and then you make it again on set when you're shooting it, and then you make it again in the edit. You know, this is a cliche at this point, but it's true. It's a cliche because it's true. You remake the film multiple times in different stages, and I guess I don't know. I find it inspirational. Like I find the way Malick approaches it, without like getting too hung up on, it has to be exactly this way. You know, like he has the flexibility. There's something in his process that gives flex in order to chase the truth, in order to chase what it is that he really, really wants to find. And I think also we see with his editing process, which, you know, some people, you know, can't stand it because it takes so long, and you know, he's been criticized for being too laborious or whatever with it. But it's you know, he's on a quest, I guess. You know, the thing to respect about it is that he's on a quest, and you know, I think this is partly why I would hold him up as, of living filmmakers, to me, he is the freest filmmaker working right now, because like he goes to those lengths to protect the freedom of the artistic process, the freedom of what he's looking for as a filmmaker. Because you know, the classic kind of response to someone taking too long editing would be like, well, he just needs a good, stronger producer to kind of like put the screws down on him, cut off the money, whatever, you know, like do all the things that Hollywood does to get its product out by a certain point. And, you know, for some filmmakers that may be necessary to get the thing out there, you know, but I think this is an area where as just the filmmaking community, the film industry really needs to have more. There needs to be more discussion about kind of like, what is it that we're really after? You know, what is that we are really doing? Why are we putting such constraints on ourselves? The classic wisdom, which I think by this point has become pharisaical, That's a whole other topic. Maybe we'll get into someday. But there's the classic wisdom is that, you know, we need constraints. Art is bred from restrictions and all that, and that's true. Like obviously, that there's deep truth to that. But in the film industry in particular, in the mainstream, you know, American film industry, like these things are now treated as a decalogue, basically, that you cannot violate, and anything that's kind of stepping outside of that is seen as, you know, as beyond the pale. And that's partly where Malick, when he does that, he's inflaming people's consciences on this regard. But a lot of people don't seem to get that, you know, he's breaking, essentially, like, to put it in simple terms, he's breaking the rules, you know, because he has mastery of them, I would say, you know, and that's incredibly inspiring, because he's chasing something greater than just satisfying the way we do things, you know. He's free. Like, again, I'm kind of going in circles because there's so much to this, but he exhibits a freedom within this brutal industry, this brutal way of making art that we call film, that is exceptional, and it almost seems like it should be impossible by most people's standards, but it's not.
It's like the Caviezel going AWOL.
Exactly.
Well, you know, like, well, but like the question, one of the questions we started with was like, why aren't there more movies like this? But it's like, but you sort of you put that better, which was, why isn't there a greater freedom? And I think, you know, the ready answer is that it takes a lot of money to make movies, and a lot of people who aren't artists. Mm-hmm. So it takes a really strong artist to sort of to maintain that artistic integrity, when you sort of necessity have to involve and really subordinate a lot of other people and visions and interests, you know, to get this artistic work done. Now, an artist, a poet, understands very readily what Malick is why Malick might work this way, right? Because I think oftentimes, obviously different artists have different methods, but I think that in general, the artist discovers in the doing. You would be forgiven if you weren't an artist. You would be forgiven for thinking that, like, oh, you know, I just do this like anything else. Like, I have to like sort of like sit down at my desk and think about what it is that I want to express and sort of calculate, you know, the best way of expressing that, and then I need to just go and do it. But
or put some prompts into an AI generator.
Yeah, right. In my own experience, is, you know, it just doesn't work that way. And especially if you're a filmmaker like Malick, who's trying to create a work that is poetic, which is to say it's operating on the level of sort of like the intuitive, the only way about that is an intuitive process. I mean, this is the gift that artists have. And so people who aren't artists, or industries that don't operate that way, can place a lot of restrictions that are actually alien to that process. I full on agree that like art requires these restrictions, certain limitations, you know, to sort of like to operate against. But it's like, you know, the work itself will have those. There will be the limitations, you know. Just the time of day is a limitation.
The material brings its own limitations.
Right. And so I don't need these extrinsic limitations like you know. Anyway, but what I'm getting at is that you know, you are plugging into something larger than yourself. You're plugging into the creative spirit, to God, and that's what's going to imbue your work with so much more than you could have put in, you know, through this sort of calculus of your own. And an artist worth his salt, as I think Malick is going to recognize that, and recognize, okay, I need to like basically get out of the way. I need to operate at the level of creative intuition, which is an openness to this inspiration from without. And then I need to basically interpret what's given me, and that happens, you know, at every stage of the process, but then in this sort of like culminating way in the final edit. So I think that like that freedom is something that we can all learn from, but especially artists, because there's a lot of pressures. Anytime you start talking about an industry, there's a lot of pressures that are coming totally extrinsic to the concerns of the artist, you know? And the artist has got to navigate that. The artist has got to figure out like how he's going to like deal with that reality. It is a reality that needs to be contended with. And clearly Malick has somehow found.
Well, I think, the thing is that he's independently wealthy, I think is the main thing. Like, I was talking to somebody who I think had a little bit of insider knowledge, was saying, like there's times he's put up his own money for projects, right? Maybe that's happened more recently with the ones that haven't fared as well critically, right. But yeah, that's really the short answer is
it's either you're independently wealthy or you start making films that you can afford to make.
Yeah, that's the other way. Yeah.